At her wedding, my daughter shouted, "Go away! My groom doesn't want you here!" I left silently with a sharp pain in my chest. The next day she called and said, "Dad, send us the keys to the villa. We're going to spend our honeymoon there." I agreed, but when she walked into the kitchen, she saw some interesting photos of her groom on the table. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The French timepiece sat in my palm like a promise. I turned it slowly under the desk lamp, watching amber light catch the engraved case. Scrollwork that some craftsmen had etched in the 1880s, each curve deliberate. The auction house had listed it as exceptional condition, and they hadn't exaggerated. I'd paid $12,000 for it, which seemed excessive until I imagined Maud's face when she opened the mahogany box. She'd always loved old things, pieces with history embedded in their mechanisms. I wrapped it in the silk cloth, closed the presentation box, and set it in the desk drawer. The wedding was 2 weeks away. 14 days until I walked my daughter down an aisle at Audubon Park and handed her to Earl Boyd, a man I'd known for 3 months and understood less with each passing week. The house felt too quiet. I left the study and headed toward the living room, where I could hear Maud's voice rising and falling in animated conversation. Earl's lower register punctuated her sentences. Agreeable, warm, the voice he used when he wanted something. They sat together on the sofa, surrounded by fabric samples and photographs of flower arrangements. Maud looked up when I entered, her face bright with the particular radiance of brides-to-be. "Dad, tell Earl he's wrong about the orchids. They're elegant, not pretentious." Earl smiled at me, easy and practiced. "I'm outnumbered. The orchids stay." I'd set the table earlier, a habit from the years after my wife passed. It gave me something to do with my hands, arranging silverware with precision, folding napkins into triangles. We gathered in the dining room as the sun dropped behind the live oaks outside, casting the room in amber shadows. The meal started pleasantly enough. Maud described the venue setup, the string quartet she'd hired, the menu she'd agonized over. Earl nodded along, asked questions at appropriate moments, played the attentive groom. I watched him across the table, noting the way his eyes moved, cataloging, assessing, always calculating something just beneath the surface. "The villa," he said suddenly during dessert. His tone was casual, conversational. "That place on the coast, it just sits empty most of the year, doesn't it? Ever consider putting it to work? Vacation rentals are booming right now. I could run the numbers for you." My hand tightened around the wine glass. The villa had been in my family for 40 years. My wife and I had spent summers there. Maud had learned to swim in that water. "The villa stays in the family," I said, keeping my voice measured. "It's not a business asset." Something flickered across Earl's face. His smile remained fixed, but his eyes went flat and cold, like a mask slipping for half a second before clicking back into place. "Just trying to help maximize your portfolio," he said, leaning back in his chair with false ease. "You've built something impressive here. Someone should make sure it grows." Maud laughed, oblivious to the charged atmosphere. "Earl's always thinking about investments. Dad, the florist confirmed the orchids will be perfect. Earl helped me choose the arrangements." "I'm sure everything will be beautiful," I said, standing. The chair scraped against hardwood. "Excuse me, I have some work to finish." I didn't have work. I had unease coiling in my chest, tightening with each breath. Back in the study, I sat in the leather chair and stared at the drawer containing the antique watch. The gift suddenly felt different, less like something I was giving to Maud, and more like something Earl was circling, waiting to claim. He'd moved into my home 3 months ago, shortly after the engagement. Maud had asked if they could stay until they found a place, and I'd agreed because I wanted her close, wanted to know the man she'd chosen. But Earl had settled into the house like he belonged there, his presence expanding to fill spaces that had been mine alone for years. The villa comment hadn't been casual. It had been a probe, testing boundaries, measuring how much he could push. And the way he'd looked at me when I refused, that coldness, told me everything I needed to know about what lay beneath his charming exterior. I opened the drawer and looked at the mahogany box again. 2 weeks. I could maintain this peace for 2 weeks, smile through the ceremony, toast their future, and then watch them build a life somewhere else, away from my home and my assets. But even as I told myself this, I knew Earl wasn't planning to go anywhere. He'd found something valuable here, and men like him didn't walk away from value. I closed the drawer and turned off the desk lamp. The house settled into darkness around me, and I sat there for a long time, listening to Maud's laughter drift down the hallway, bright and innocent, and so completely unaware of what I was beginning to see. The mahogany box rested in my jacket pocket, its weight reassuring as I locked the car. I'd checked my appearance in the rearview mirror twice, straightened my tie, smoothed my lapels, forced my face into an expression of paternal pride. The morning sun filtered through the live oaks surrounding the Audubon Park venue, dappling the walkway with moving shadows. Inside, the entrance hall buzzed with arriving guests. I recognized faces from the business community, old acquaintances I'd dealt with over decades of running the antique shop. Marcus Chen from the auction house gripped my hand firmly. "Congratulations, Bernard. Maud's a lucky bride." "Thank you, Marcus." The same exchange repeated as I moved through the crowd. Handshakes, smiles, congratulations that I accepted with practiced ease. Roughly 120 people had been invited, and it seemed most of them had arrived early, filling the elegant space with conversation and laughter. The main reception area opened before me, decorated with those orchids Maud had insisted on. White petals cascaded from tall arrangements, their elegance undeniable. I touched the box in my pocket, planning how I'd present the gift, privately, before the ceremony. A moment between father and daughter before everything changed. Maud stood near the receiving line with Earl, greeting early arrivals. She wore a pearl-colored dress, not her wedding gown yet, something for the pre-ceremony mingling. I started toward them, navigating through clusters of guests. She saw me coming. Her expression shifted, something tightened in her face, and she broke away from the group, moving to intercept me. Her hand found my elbow, not affectionate but firm, steering me away from the others. "Dad." Her voice dropped low, barely above a whisper, but the tension in it cut through the ambient noise. "You need to go. Earl doesn't want you here. Please just leave." The words didn't process immediately. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "What? Maud, what are you talking about?" Her fingers tightened on my arm. Around us I felt heads turning, conversations pausing. The confrontation was happening in full view of guests standing near the gift tables, witnesses to whatever this was. "Just go," she said, sharper now, her face flushed. "Don't ruin this for me, please." Pain lanced through my chest, sharp, immediate, radiating down my left arm. Angina, the stress triggering the condition my cardiologist had warned me about. My hand moved instinctively toward my heart, but I caught myself, converted the gesture to adjusting my jacket. I would not show weakness here, not in front of these people, not in front of Earl, who I could now see watching from across the room, his expression satisfied, pleased, like a man admiring his own handiwork. This humiliation had been planned, orchestrated. "I understand," I said quietly, releasing the words with effort. I didn't argue, didn't plead or demand explanations. What would be the point? Everyone was watching, Marcus Chen, the Johnsons from 2 streets over, colleagues from Maud's gallery. I could see them registering this scene, filing it away as gossip for later. I walked to the gift table, each step measured despite the crushing pressure in my chest. The mahogany box emerged from my pocket. I set it down among the other wrapped packages, this $12,000 token of love, reduced to one item among many impersonal objects. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. The distance felt immense, endless. Whispers followed me like a current. "Is that her father? Why is he leaving?" Something happened. I kept my head up, my pace steady, refusing to hurry or stumble. The doorway finally appeared. The parking lot. My car sitting where I'd left it 20 minutes ago, back when I'd still been a father, preparing to celebrate his daughter's wedding. Inside the vehicle, doors closed and locked, I fumbled for the small bottle of nitroglycerin I kept in the console. My hands shook as I placed the tablet under my tongue. The medication dissolved, bitter and chemical. I closed my eyes, waiting for the pain to ease. Through the windshield, I could see the venue. Elegant, expensive, filled with people who'd just witnessed my public rejection. My daughter had chosen Earl over me, or Earl had chosen to demonstrate his power, and Maud had complied. The pain in my chest began to recede, replaced by something colder than medicine could provide. Clarity, focus, the sharp edge of understanding. Earl Boyd had engineered this. The timing, the public nature of it, the casual cruelty. This was a message, a demonstration of control. He'd spent 3 months in my home, mapping my assets, identifying what he wanted. And now he'd cut me out, removed the obstacle, claimed everything as his own. But he'd made a mistake. He'd assumed I'd accept this, slink away in shame, let him have it all. I sat in that car, my hand still pressed against my chest, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt father was still there, grief-stricken at losing his daughter. But something else emerged alongside it, colder, harder, patient. Earl Boyd had declared war. He just didn't know I understood the battlefield yet. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the venue and its witnesses behind. But I wasn't running. I was regrouping, and tomorrow, when Maud inevitably called, asking for something, the villa keys perhaps for their honeymoon, I'd begin learning exactly who Earl Boyd really was. The game had changed. Now it was my turn to move. The mahogany box sat on my desk where I'd placed it hours ago. The antique watch inside, returned from the gift table by some well-meaning guest who'd tracked down my address, mocked me with its perfection. $12,000 of craftsmanship that had never reached my daughter's hands. I'd been sitting here since returning from the wedding, watching dawn break through the study windows, my chest still tight with residual pain from yesterday's angina attack. Sleep hadn't come. My mind kept replaying the scene, Maud's tense whisper, the watching guests, Earl's satisfied expression across the room, the calculated cruelty of it. When my phone rang mid-morning, I stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. Maud's name glowed there, insistent. "Dad, we want to use the villa for our honeymoon. Can you send me the keys? Earl says the coast would be perfect this time of year." Her voice was bright, rushed, bubbling with newlywed excitement. No apology, no acknowledgement of yesterday. Just a demand for my property, delivered as casually as requesting sugar for coffee. I said nothing. The silence stretched between us, broken only by my breathing and the distant sound of traffic through her end of the line. "Dad, are you there?" "The villa." I kept my voice carefully neutral. "For your honeymoon." "Yes, is that a problem? We'd leave this Friday." Friday, 5 days away. Earl wanted immediate access to the coastal property, the place Maud's mother and I had built together, where we'd spent summers watching our daughter learn to swim in the Gulf waters. "I'll need to prepare it first," I said, each word measured and deliberate. "The systems haven't been checked since winter. Give me a week." "A week?" Her disappointment came through clearly. "I guess that's fine. Just let me know when it's ready." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat holding the phone, staring at the blank screen, feeling something cold and clear crystallize in my chest. This wasn't about romance or honeymoons. Earl was moving on the assets already, assessing value, measuring what he could claim. Yesterday's humiliation had been the opening move. Today's request was the follow-through. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my leather address book, the one I'd maintained for 40 years of business contacts. I flipped through pages until I found Marcus Webb's personal number. Marcus managed the Roosevelt Hotel and had once mentioned over drinks at a charity auction that he knew people who could handle delicate matters discreetly. He answered on the second ring. "Marcus, it's Bernard Mason. I need a favor." "Bernard?" His voice carried immediate concern. "I heard something happened at your daughter's wedding. Are you all right?" "What exactly do you need, Bernard?" I leaned back in my chair, choosing my words carefully. Someone who can look into a person's background, thoroughly, discreetly. A pause, then, "I know someone. Former police, now private. Louis Morales. He's reliable. Can you send me his contact information? Give me 10 minutes. Another pause. "Bernard, be careful with this." "I will." The text arrived 8 minutes later. Louis Morales, Magazine Street address, phone number. I stared at the information, feeling the first stirring of something that had been dormant since yesterday. Not hope exactly, but purpose. I spent Sunday making the call, setting the appointment for Monday morning. The hours crawled by with unbearable slowness, but I used them productively. I wrote down everything I knew about Earl, his arrival in Maud's life 6 months ago, the quick engagement, his move into my home, the casual questions about my properties, yesterday's orchestrated humiliation, today's audacious demand. Patterns emerged when I laid it all out. Earl wasn't impulsive. Every move had been calculated, each step designed to position him closer to my assets while isolating me from my daughter. Monday morning arrived slowly. I dressed with care, choosing a suit that projected competence and stability. Louis Morales needed to see me as a serious client, not a desperate father grasping at vindication. I called Maud back before leaving. "The villa will be ready in a week," I told her. "I need to check all the systems properly, safety first." She sighed but agreed. "Earl won't be happy about the delay." "I'm sure Earl will manage," I said, and ended the call. In my hand, I held the notepad where I'd written Louis Morales' information. The first concrete step toward understanding what I was dealing with. The first tool in a counterattack I was only beginning to formulate. I picked up the phone and dialed Louis' number. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Morales." "Mr. Morales, my name is Bernard Mason. Marcus Webb gave me your contact information. I need to hire an investigator. I have time Monday morning, 9 o'clock, Magazine Street." He gave me the address. "I'll be there," I said. After I hung up, I sat for a moment longer in my study, looking at the mahogany box containing the rejected watch. Then I stood, straightened my tie, and prepared to take the first active step in a game I hadn't chosen but refused to lose. The building on Magazine Street was modest, red brick, narrow windows, the kind of place that housed accountants and insurance agents. I found parking at a meter, fed at quarters, and stood on the sidewalk collecting my thoughts before entering. Louis Morales' office occupied the second floor. I climbed the stairs slowly, my chest reminding me of Saturday's angina attack with each step. A door at the landing bore simple lettering, "L. Morales, Private Investigations." I knocked. A voice called, "It's open." The office matched the building, functional, no pretense. A cluttered desk dominated the space, covered with file folders, a computer monitor, stacks of papers held down by a coffee mug. Behind the desk sat a man in his early 50s, gray threading through dark hair, eyes that assessed me in the 3 seconds it took me to cross the threshold. "Bernard Mason." I extended my hand. His grip was firm, professional. "Louis Morales, have a seat." I settled into the chair across from him, placed my business card on the desk between us. He glanced at it, establishing credibility, I understood. Antique shop owner, legitimate businessman, not someone chasing conspiracy theories. "What exactly do you need to know about this man?" he asked, getting straight to business. I appreciated the directness. "Everything. Previous marriages, financial standing, criminal history, current associations. I need to know who my daughter married." Louis picked up a legal pad, began making notes. "Name? Earl Boyd. 38 years old, real estate agent, claims to work for Prestige Properties downtown." I provided the details methodically. Earl's arrival 6 months ago, the whirlwind courtship, his move into my home 3 months ago, the questions about my properties disguised as casual interest. "The wedding was Saturday," I continued. "My daughter asked me to leave before the ceremony. Her exact words were, 'Earl doesn't want you here.' Sunday morning, she called, asking for the keys to my coastal villa. No apology, no explanation. Just a demand for property access." Louis's pen moved steadily across the pad. "Previous marriages?" he asked without looking up. "I don't know. That's why I'm here." "Financial situation?" "Claims he's successful, drives a leased BMW, wears expensive clothes. But I've never seen evidence of substantial assets." "Any threats made?" I paused, considering. "Nothing overt, but his brother, Edwin Boyd, supposedly a lawyer, has been mentioned this week. Maud called yesterday saying Edwin could optimize my property taxes if I'd meet with him." Louis's pen stopped. He looked up. "Introducing a lawyer this soon after the wedding. That's interesting." "That's a comprehensive background check," he said, setting down the pen. "Takes time, 2 weeks minimum, maybe longer, depending on what I find." "Money isn't the issue," I said. "Thoroughness is. Can you do it?" He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I can do it. 2,000 retainer, 150 per hour plus expenses. You'll get detailed reports, nothing verbal. Only documentation for everything I find." I pulled out my checkbook, wrote the check without hesitation, tore it from the book and slid it across the desk. His fingers were already reaching for it before I finished the motion. "You'll hear from me within 2 weeks, he said. "Sooner if I find something urgent." We shook hands again. I left with his business card in my pocket and the first flicker of something like hope warming my chest. The week that followed tested my patience and resolve in equal measure. Earl escalated his pressure campaign through Maud, using her as his instrument without her even recognizing it. Wednesday, she called about villa documents. Earl wants to know about the property deed, for insurance purposes, he says. My insurance is current, I replied, keeping my voice even. Thursday brought another call. Dad, Earl's brother Edwin really could help with your taxes. It's free consultation. I have my own legal counsel, Maud, but thank you. You're being difficult. Her frustration came through clearly now. We're trying to help. I'm managing things fine. The villa needs more time. I'll let you know. Friday's call contained an edge I hadn't heard before. Earl says you don't trust us. She hung up before I could respond. I sat at my desk after each conversation, adding entries to a log I'd started Monday afternoon. Date, time, content of each call, every request and implication. The pattern was undeniable. Earl was tightening the trap, using my daughter as his proxy while positioning his attorney brother as the next pressure point. Saturday arrived without contact. I spent the day at my shop, immersing myself in appraisals and customer interactions, anything to distract from the waiting. Sunday passed similarly, each hour stretching toward Lewis's promised 2-week deadline. Monday brought another call from Maud. The villa, Dad, it's been a week. I need a few more days, I said. There are repairs required. We want to go this weekend. I understand, but I won't give you keys to a property that isn't safe. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Then, fine, but Earl's getting impatient. She disconnected. I added the entry to my log, noting the explicit mention of Earl's impatience, the implied threat in her tone. I sat back in my chair, looking at the documented timeline of pressure, manipulation, escalation. The trap was tightening around me, each call another turn of the screw. But, somewhere on Magazine Street, Louis Morales was digging into Earl Boyd's past, and every day that passed brought me closer to understanding what I was really fighting. Louis had said 2 weeks. I could hold out that long. I had to. The antique clock in my hands was French, circa 1920, brass movement still pristine beneath the tarnished case. I was cataloging spring inventory when my phone rang. Louis Morales. 2 weeks had passed since our first meeting. 2 weeks of maintaining the shop, fielding Maud's increasingly frustrated calls, documenting every pressure tactic in my log. I set down the clock and stepped into my private office before answering. Mr. Mason, I have preliminary findings. His voice carried that measured urgency I was learning to recognize. We need to meet. You found something. Several things. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I checked my watch. 2:30. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I locked the shop, flipped the sign to closed, and drove through French Quarter traffic to Magazine Street. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. I'd been waiting for this call, but now that it had come, apprehension mixed uncomfortably with vindication in my chest. The stairs to Louis's office felt familiar now. I climbed them faster than during my first visit, pushed through the door marked L. Morales, Private Investigations, without knocking. Louis sat behind his cluttered desk, a manila folder positioned precisely in front of the empty chair. He gestured for me to sit. I lowered myself into the chair, accepting the folder with steady hands, though I opened it slowly, bracing for impact. Earl Boyd has a pattern, Louis said, his tone clinical. 3 marriages, none ended well. The first document showed a marriage license from 2008, followed by an annulment petition. I scanned the legal language: fraud, misrepresentation of financial status, concealment of previous debts. The second marriage lasted 3 years before divorce proceedings. Grounds: infidelity, financial malfeasance, emotional abuse. The third marriage ended with death. I looked up sharply. Officially ruled accidental, Louis said, reading my expression. But the investigation was extensive. Insurance company fought the claim for 8 months before settling. Fraud, infidelity, death. I set the papers down carefully. Which marriage was Maud supposed to be? The fourth one, but there's more. He slid another document across the desk. Credit reports, account statements. He's $47,000 in debt. 2 credit companies, multiple collection agencies. His brother Edwin helps him dodge creditors through legal maneuvers, bankruptcy threats, jurisdictional games. I studied the numbers, the pattern of maxed out cards, the cascade of late payments and defaults. Earl wore expensive clothes, drove a BMW, projected success. All of it borrowed against futures he never intended to honor. And there's this. Lewis produced a photograph. A woman entering an apartment building, dark hair, 40s, carrying grocery bags. Mamie Morales, no relation to me. Earl's been seeing her regularly, twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, her apartment in Metairie. While married to my daughter. While married to your daughter, Louis confirmed. I've documented 6 meetings in the past 2 weeks. Same pattern every time. Arrives at 7, leaves around 10. I set the photograph down beside the marriage records and financial documents. The evidence spread before me like a map of deliberate destruction. My instincts had been correct, but the reality was worse than I'd imagined. Earl wasn't just a manipulator, he was a predator with a refined technique, and Maud was his current mark. I need photographs, I said, looking up at Louis. Everything. Him entering her building, leaving, clear shots of both of them. Evidence that will stand up in the court. Louis nodded slowly. That's surveillance work. Time-intensive, expensive. 3 weeks minimum, maybe 4. I have to catch them together, get clear documentation, establish the pattern beyond doubt. I pulled out my checkbook, pen already in hand. I don't care what it costs. Get me evidence that will stand up in court. We're talking substantial additional hours. How much do you need? I was writing the check as I spoke. He named a figure. I wrote it without hesitation, tore the check from the book, slid it across the desk, where it joined the manila folder and photographs. Louis picked up the check, studied my face. You understand this takes time. He can't know he's being watched. I need to be invisible. I understand. Do whatever you need to do. We shook hands. I gathered copies of everything. The marriage records, the debt reports, the surveillance notes, the photograph of Mamie entering her building. Evidence that my daughter had married a man who'd done this before, who was doing it even now, who would continue doing it until someone stopped him. I left Louis's office with the folder under my arm. 3 weeks seemed manageable when I made it to the car. I was wrong. The certified letter arrived less than a week later. I signed for it at my front door, recognizing the return address immediately. Edwin Boyd, attorney at law. My chest tightened as I carried the envelope to my study. The letter was precisely what I'd expected and feared. Formal legal letterhead. 3 pages of pseudo-legal language designed to intimidate rather than inform. I read it 3 times, highlighting key phrases. Louisiana forced heirship laws. Legitimate claim to family assets. Voluntary transfer recommended. Legal complications if disputed. The core demand was simple. Transfer the coastal villa to Maud as a wedding gift, voluntarily, to avoid unfortunate legal proceedings that would strain family relationships and incur substantial legal costs for all parties. It was elegantly phrased intimidation. Edwin knew how to weaponize legal terminology against someone unfamiliar with estate law. I picked up my phone, dialed Richard Chen's office. Richard had handled my business legal matters for 15 years. Contracts, property transfers, corporate filings. His paralegal answered. Mr. Chen is with a client. Can I have him return your call? Tell him it's Bernard Mason. It's urgent. He'll call within the hour. I spent that hour analyzing Edwin's letter, making notes in the margins, identifying every threat and implication. By the time my phone rang, I had the document strategy mapped completely. Bernard, what's going on? Richard's voice carried immediate concern. Richard, I need your expertise. I've received a letter from an attorney making claims about Louisiana inheritance law. What kind of claims? I read the relevant sections aloud. Richard's silence grew heavier as I continued. Who sent this? He finally asked. Edwin Boyd? I know him. This is theater, not law. Explain. Forced heirship only applies after death, Bernard. You're very much alive and have complete control of your property during your lifetime. This letter has no legal standing whatsoever. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by cold anger. Edwin knew this. Earl knew this. They were counting on my ignorance, hoping I'd capitulate under the weight of official-looking legal threats. So, I can ignore this? Not ignore, respond. I'll draft a letter making clear we understand the law and won't be pressured. Richard paused. But Bernard, if they're making claims on your estate, you should consider restructuring. Have you updated your will recently? Not in 8 years. What do you recommend? Create a trust for the villa. Remove it from your estate entirely. Change your will to protect your other assets. It's not cheap. We're talking 8 to 12,000, maybe a month of work. But it bulletproofs everything. I pulled out my estate planning files from the locked cabinet, spread them beside Edwin's threatening letter. Offense and defense simultaneously. Do it, I said without hesitation. All of it. How soon can you start? I'll have my paralegal pull your existing documents today. Another pause. Bernard, what's really going on here? I chose my words carefully. My son-in-law is not who my daughter thinks he is. I'm taking steps to protect what I've built. Understood. I'll get started immediately. Expect a draft for your review by next week. After hanging up, I sat at my desk. Edwin's letter on one side, my estate files on the other. Lewis's manila folder locked in my drawer. I was now fighting on multiple fronts, gathering evidence against Earl while simultaneously fortifying my legal defenses. I opened my pressure log, added a new entry with precise details, date, time, specific demands from Edwin's letter, my response through Richard. The documentation grew thicker each week, a chronological record of Earl's escalating campaign. 3 weeks until Louis had photographs. 4 weeks until Richard completed the trust restructuring. I needed to hold the line until both pieces fell into place. My phone buzzed. Maud's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, waited, then listened to her message. Dad, Edwin says you received his letter. This doesn't have to be complicated. Just give us the villa and we can move past all this tension. Earl and I want a good relationship with you, but you're making it impossible. Her voice carried frustration, but beneath it I heard something else. Uncertainty, maybe confusion. She didn't understand what was happening because Earl hadn't told her the truth about anything. I saved the voicemail, added a note to my log. Evidence accumulated in multiple forms. Legal threats, pressure calls, manipulation patterns. When the time came, I would need all of it. The waiting game continued. Richard worked on the trust. Louis gathered his photographic evidence. Earl and Maud pressed their demands with increasing urgency, unaware that I was building a case that would dismantle everything they were trying to construct. I just needed to hold out a little longer. I was reviewing quarterly tax documents at my desk when the call came. Luis Morales. 3 weeks had passed since I'd authorized the surveillance. 3 weeks of maintaining normal routines, while Earl and Maud pressed their demands with increasing urgency. Mr. Mason, I have your complete package. His voice carried professional satisfaction. 47 photographs, audio transcripts, everything documented. When can you come by? This afternoon. An hour later, I sat in Louis's cluttered office watching him lay out photograph after photograph across his desk. Earl and Mamie at a restaurant in Métairie, their hands intertwined. Earl entering her apartment building, time-stamped 7:15 p.m. Earl and Mamie embracing on her balcony, the intimacy undeniable. Earl's car parked overnight at her address, photographed at midnight and again at dawn. 3 weeks of surveillance, Louis said, organizing the images chronologically. 47 usable photographs. He's consistent. Tuesdays and Fridays, same apartment complex. I studied each image carefully. These are clear, no ambiguity. None. Louis produced a small digital recorder, pressed play. A woman's voice emerged, casual conversation captured from outside an apartment door. Once he gets the inheritance sorted, we won't have to hide anymore. He promised me we could finally be together. I looked up sharply. She knows he married for money. She's part of the plan. Louis slid another folder across the desk. Court records from his previous marriages, certified copies. The pattern is identical each time. Whirlwind courtship, marriage, financial access, then either divorce or insurance claim. I opened the folder, scanned the documents. 3 marriages before Maud, each one a calculated campaign. The evidence was comprehensive, methodical, irrefutable. After a long silence, I asked, "How much do I owe you?" Total package, $6,200. That covers everything. Photographs, transcripts, certified document copies, my final report. I wrote the check without hesitation, tore it from the book, slid it across the desk. Louis handed me the complete dossier in a leather document case. Photographs, recordings, financial records, court documents. Everything I needed. I carried it to my car like precious cargo, set it carefully in the passenger seat. That night in my study, I spread the photographs across my desk under the lamp's focused light. Each image told part of the story. Earl's double life, documented in 47 moments of calculated betrayal. I selected the most damning images: Earl and Mamie kissing outside a restaurant, Earl leaving her apartment at dawn, their fingers intertwined at a coffee shop. Then, I organized the supporting documents: marriage records with official court seals, financial statements showing his debt, the audio transcript where Mamie referenced inheritance. The next morning, I called Maud. "The villa is ready," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You and Earl can use it whenever you'd like." Her surprise came through immediately. "Really? Dad, that's wonderful. We can come today?" "I'll make sure everything is prepared. The keys will be in the usual place, kitchen counter." "Thank you. I know things have been tense. Maybe this is a new start." "Maybe it is," I said carefully. I hung up and stared at the dossier on my desk. Then I picked up my car keys and the leather case and drove to Bay St. Louis. The villa sat quiet on its stretch of coastline, waves visible through the windows. I let myself in, went straight to the kitchen. The table was wide, solid wood, perfectly positioned where sunlight would illuminate it in the morning. I wiped down the surface, then began arranging everything with deliberate precision. The photographs went first, central images showing Earl and Mamie in unmistakable intimacy. Supporting documents fanned out in a circle around them. Court records with their official seals, financial statements, the audio transcript summary. Finally, I placed my handwritten note in the center, positioned on top of the clearest photograph of Earl embracing Mamie outside her apartment building. The note was simple. "Maud, I'm sorry you have to learn the truth this way, but you need to know who you're living with. Your father." I stood back, studying the arrangement. Morning sunlight would hit the table directly. She'd walk in, come to the kitchen, everyone did first thing, and see it all immediately. No way to miss it, no way to misunderstand. I locked the door behind me and drove back to New Orleans. The trap was set. Now I had to wait for it to spring. Maud's text arrived Friday evening. "At the villa! It's perfect!" 3 exclamation points, followed by a heart emoji. I stared at the screen in my study, not responding. There was nothing to say yet. She hadn't gone to the kitchen. Saturday passed in excruciating silence. I tried working at my shop, but kept checking my phone, imagining scenarios. Had she found the photographs? Was she confronting Earl, crying, leaving? The not knowing was worse than anything I'd anticipated. I closed the shop early, drove home, paced my study. My chest felt tight, but I couldn't tell if it was angina or anxiety. I took a nitroglycerin tablet preventatively, sat at my desk, stared at my phone. Saturday evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. I picked up the phone 3 times before actually calling. It rang 4 times, 5, then went to voicemail. "Honey, how's your getaway?" I kept my voice carefully neutral. "Just checking in. Call when you can." Sunday brought more silence. I barely slept Saturday night, lay awake imagining every possible reaction. By Sunday afternoon, I was considering driving to the villa when my phone finally rang. Maud's voice trembled. "Dad, I found what you left on the table." I gripped the phone harder. "And I need time to think, to process. A long pause filled with breathing and what might have been suppressed crying. "I can't talk right now. I'm here when you're ready. I have to go." She hung up abruptly. I sat at my desk, phone in hand, forcing myself not to call back. She'd seen the evidence. She was processing. I had to let her work through it, as much as every paternal instinct screamed at me to drive there immediately. Monday morning, my phone rang at 9:15, Maud's name on the screen. I answered before the second ring. Her voice was broken, words tumbling out between sobs. I saw the photographs Saturday morning. I went to the kitchen to make coffee and they were just there, spread across the table. All those pictures of Earl with that woman. I didn't believe it at first. I thought you had somehow, I don't know, faked them. I stayed quiet, letting her talk. I showed them to Earl. He went crazy, Dad. Screamed that you made it all up, that you're trying to destroy us because you're bitter and alone. He said you hired actors, fabricated everything. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to so badly. "What changed?" I asked gently. Saturday night he fell asleep. I couldn't. I kept seeing those pictures, so I looked at the documents again, Court records from his other marriages, dates, names of women I'd never heard about, official court seals. You can't fake those, can you? No, you can't. And that transcript, her voice caught, where the woman talks about after the inheritance and being together once he gets what's coming to him. That's me, isn't it? I'm the inheritance he was waiting for. Yes. A long silence filled with her crying. Then, Sunday morning I told him I wanted a divorce. He tried to talk his way out of it first, said I was being manipulated by you. Then he got angry, started yelling. Then he threatened me, said I'd regret this, that his brother would make sure I lost everything. Then he just packed his things and left. That was an hour ago. I closed my eyes, picturing each scene. How are you? How could I not see it? Her voice was small, lost. Why didn't I see what he was? Because you wanted to believe in something beautiful, I said carefully. That's not weakness, Maud. That's hope. Silence again, then a small voice. Can you come get me? I don't want to be here alone. I was already reaching for my car keys. I'm already on my way. The drive to Bay St. Louis took 55 minutes. I found Maud sitting on the villa's front porch, still in the clothes she'd probably worn since Saturday, a folder in her lap containing some of the evidence. She looked up when I pulled into the driveway, and the expression on her face, devastation mixed with relief, broke something in my chest that I'd been keeping carefully controlled for weeks. I got out of the car and walked up the steps. She stood, the folder slipping from her lap, papers scattering across the porch. Neither of us bothered to pick them up. I'm sorry, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. I pulled her into an embrace, feeling her shake with sobs against my shoulder. You're safe now. That's all that matters. We stood there for several minutes, father and daughter, while evidence of Earl Boyd's betrayal scattered in the Gulf breeze around our feet. The trap had worked. The truth had emerged. But standing there holding my broken daughter, I felt no satisfaction. Only the grim necessity of what I'd had to do. Back at the mansion, Maud sat across from me in my study, the same chair where Earl had sat months ago, probing about the villa with false casualness. Now, she held the evidence folder in her lap, photographs visible through the half-open flap, her face drawn with exhaustion and a shame so profound it seemed to age her. At the wedding, she said, tears streaming down her cheeks, her voice barely above a whisper. I told you to leave. I said Earl didn't want you there. I chose him over you in front of everyone who knows us, your friends, your colleagues, people who've watched me grow up. I placed my hand over hers, feeling how cold her fingers were despite the June warmth. I let the silence stretch for a moment, choosing my words carefully. You didn't know what he was, but you tried to warn me. Her voice broke completely. The way you looked at him at dinner, the questions you asked about his work and his family. I saw it, Dad. I saw your concern, and I ignored every single sign because I thought you were just being overprotective. I accused you of not wanting me to be happy. Because you wanted to believe in something beautiful, I said carefully, squeezing her hand. That's human nature. That's not a failure, Maud. That's hope. And hope isn't weakness. I'm so sorry, Dad. The words came out in a sob. I'm so incredibly sorry. You're home now. We'll fix this. That's what matters. She stayed in the mansion after that, sleeping in her old bedroom, the one she'd abandoned when Earl moved in. I heard her crying at night sometimes, muffled sounds through the walls that made my chest tight with anger at what Earl had done to her. The next 3 days brought Earl's calls, first to Maud's phone, which she'd given me permission to screen. I sat at my desk, documenting each voicemail in my pressure log, watching his strategy evolve in real time, from charm to manipulation to barely concealed threats. First message, Monday morning, apologetic and confused. Maud, baby, this is crazy. Your dad twisted everything. Those photos, I can explain all of it. It's not what it looks like. Call me, please. I love you. Second message, Tuesday afternoon, accusatory and manipulative. Maud, you're making a huge mistake. Your father is manipulating you. He's been against us from the beginning. He never wanted us to be happy because he can't stand being alone. Don't let him destroy what we built together. Third message, Wednesday evening, threatening. Fine, don't call back. But you'll regret this. You and your father both. My lawyer says we have options. Edwin says there are ways to make this very expensive for you. I saved each message, added timestamps and summaries to my log, building a harassment case if we needed it. Edwin's letters arrived next, delivered by courier in thick manila envelopes embossed with his law firm's seal. Demands for compensation for emotional distress, claims of damage to Earl's reputation and professional standing, threats of legal action for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I filed them methodically in a folder labeled Boyd Legal Threats without responding. Richard Chen handled all correspondence, responding with clinical precision that these claims had no legal merit and that continued harassment would result in counterclaims. Mid-June, Richard called with news that lifted a weight I'd been carrying for months. I was in my study, reviewing quarterly reports from my shop, when his name appeared on my phone. "The trust is complete," he said without preamble. "Villa's out of your estate entirely. New will is signed, witnessed, and filed. You're bulletproof legally. Nothing Earl or Edwin try can touch your assets now." If he'd gotten access before all this, I asked, though I already knew the answer. He'd have found the barn empty. Everything you own is protected through the trust structure. It would take years of litigation to even attempt to break it, and they'd lose. A pause. "How's Maud holding up?" "Better than expected. She's filing for divorce next week. She has all the evidence." "Good. Louisiana courts don't look kindly on fraud, especially marital fraud. With documentation like this, it'll be straightforward. Unpleasant, but straightforward." Maud met with Diane Foster the following Monday, a divorce attorney Richard recommended, sharp, mid-40s, with a reputation for aggressive representation in fraud cases. I sat beside Maud in Diane's downtown office as she reviewed Lewis's evidence package, watching her expression shift from professional interest to something close to righteous anger. 47 photographs spanning 3 weeks, Diane said, spreading selected images across her desk. Audio recordings where his mistress explicitly mentions waiting for the inheritance. 3 previous marriages with documented patterns of fraud and financial manipulation. $47,000 in concealed debt. She looked up at Maud with fierce sympathy. "This man is a career predator with a refined technique. You're victim number 4 that we know about." "Can he claim anything?" Maud's voice was small, fragile. "The house, my father's property, anything from the marriage? You were married less than 3 months. Everything is premarital property. Louisiana law is clear on that. And with this evidence of fraudulent intent, the recordings, the pattern, the concealed debts, he leaves with nothing but what he brought, his debts and his lies." "He'll fight, though," Maud said. "He'll make this ugly." "Let him try." Diane's smile was cold and professional. "We have a case that argues itself. The judge will see these photographs, and it's over. I've handled hundreds of divorces. This is the most documented case of marital fraud I've ever seen." The divorce papers were filed late June. I was in my study, working on inventory spreadsheets, when I heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, I watched Earl emerge from a vehicle I didn't recognize, probably borrowed since the BMW had been repossessed by the leasing company. He'd returned to collect some belongings he had left behind. The process server, a young woman with a clipboard, approached him on the walkway. I watched Earl's face as he accepted the envelope, signed the receipt. His expression went from confusion to shock, white as paper, then transformed into rage, red flooding his cheeks and neck. He looked toward the house, and for a moment our eyes met through the window. I didn't step back. I held his gaze until he looked away, crumpling the envelope in his fist. July brought Earl's counterattack through his attorney, not Edwin, who couldn't represent family in divorce proceedings due to conflict of interest. The settlement demand arrived via certified mail on a Tuesday morning. Requests for property division, alimony, compensation for emotional investment in the relationship, and professional opportunities foregone during marriage. It was fantasy, desperation disguised as legal strategy. Diane responded by sending the complete evidence package to Earl's lawyer. Every photograph, every recording, the certified court records from his previous marriages, the financial documents showing his concealed debts and ongoing affair throughout the marriage. The settlement demand quietly disappeared after that. No response, no further communication, no revised proposals. Earl's attorney had seen what he was defending and wanted no part of it. Professional ethics aside, it was an unwinnable case. Late July, the court date notice arrived. August 15th, 10 o'clock. Orleans Parish Courthouse. Final divorce hearing. I set the notice on my desk and stared at it for a long moment. 4.5 months since the wedding. 4.5 months of investigation, evidence gathering, legal maneuvering, and patient documentation. The end was approaching. Justice, not revenge. Protection, not destruction. I'd never wanted to hurt Earl. I'd simply wanted him away from my daughter, unable to claim what he'd never earned, exposed for what he truly was, so he couldn't do this to someone else. The weeks until the hearing passed in careful routine. Maud stayed close, healing slowly, rediscovering the person she'd been before Earl entered her life. We had dinners together again, quiet meals where we didn't talk about Earl or the divorce, just normal conversation about her work at the gallery and my shop. Earl's calls stopped after his lawyer reviewed our evidence. Edwin's threatening letters ceased after Richard's final warning about harassment litigation. The house felt peaceful again, the oppressive tension that had filled it since December, finally dissipating like morning fog under sunlight. August came with Louisiana's summer heat and the approaching court date. The night before the hearing, I pressed my suit with meticulous care, set out my tie, polished my shoes. I prepared as methodically as I had for everything else in this long campaign. Tomorrow, the legal system would deliver what my investigation had built toward. Official recognition that Earl Boyd had perpetrated fraud, official dissolution of his claim to my daughter, and official protection for Maud moving forward. I stood in my study, looking at the mahogany box containing the antique watch that had never made it to Maud on her wedding day. Tomorrow, after the hearing, I would give it to her properly, not as a wedding gift, but as a symbol of restoration, time given back, a future reclaimed. The Orleans Parish Courthouse hallway felt cool despite the August heat radiating off the pavement outside. Morning light filtered through tall windows, casting geometric shadows across marble floors worn smooth by decades of footfall. Maud sat beside me on a wooden bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white with tension. I placed my hand on her shoulder, feeling the rigid set of her muscles. "You all right?" I asked quietly. She nodded, but her voice betrayed her. "I just want this finished. I want him out of my life officially, legally, permanently. It will be, soon." People move past us, lawyers with briefcases, families clustered together, speaking in hushed tones, court officers checking dockets. The machinery of justice grinding forward with bureaucratic inevitability. Diane Foster appeared, confident in a navy suit that projected professional authority, carrying a leather briefcase that I knew contained copies of everything, the photographs, the recordings, the court documents. "They're here," she said, sitting beside Maud. "Earl and his attorney just checked in downstairs. Remember, this is largely procedural at this point. The evidence speaks for itself. Just answer truthfully if the judge asks you anything directly. But I expect this to be quick." Earl appeared at the far end of the hallway with a man in an ill-fitting suit, his attorney, someone I didn't recognize. Earl looked diminished somehow, as if the past months had physically reduced him, thinner, older, the swagger and confidence that had once surrounded him completely absent. His eyes found mine across the 40 feet of hallway. I didn't look away, didn't react. No gloating, no satisfaction, just calm certainty that justice was coming. He looked away first. At 9:55, our docket was called. We filed into the courtroom, traditional, wood-paneled, the seal of Louisiana prominent behind the judge's bench. We took our positions at separate tables, Earl and his attorney on one side, Maud, Diane, and I on the other. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair pulled back severely, sharp eyes behind reading glasses, an expression that suggested she'd seen every variation of human duplicity and wasn't easily impressed. Judge Margaret Rousseau, according to the nameplate. She settled into her chair, opened the file before her, and began reading with methodical attention. The courtroom was silent except for the whisper of turning pages and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. The hearing lasted 30 minutes that felt simultaneously endless and instantaneous. Judge Rousseau examined the photographs one by one, reading portions of the audio transcript aloud in a flat, clinical voice. She reviewed the certified court records from Earl's previous marriages with visible attention to detail, making notes on a legal pad. "Counsel," she said, looking at Earl's attorney, Does your client contest the authenticity of these photographs showing him with Ms. Mamie Morales on multiple dates throughout his marriage to the petitioner? Earl's attorney stood. Your Honor, the relationship between Mr. Boyd and Ms. Morales is complicated, but... Counsel. The judge's voice was ice. I asked a simple question. Do you contest the authenticity of these photographs? Yes or no? A pause. Earl leaned forward, whispered something urgent to his attorney. The attorney straightened. No, Your Honor, we don't contest their authenticity. Did Mr. Boyd disclose his previous marriages to Ms. Mason before their wedding? Silence from Earl's side of the room. Did he disclose his financial debts totaling $47,000? More silence. Did he inform her that he was maintaining a relationship with another woman during their courtship and marriage? Earl's attorney cleared his throat. Your Honor, my client's personal. Answer the question, counsel. No, Your Honor. Judge Rousseau set down the documents, removed her reading glasses, and looked directly at Earl with an expression of undisguised contempt. The evidence before this court demonstrates a clear, calculated pattern of fraudulent intent. Mr. Boyd concealed 3 previous marriages, 2 ending in divorce, and 1 under suspicious circumstances that warranted extensive investigation. He concealed significant financial debts. He maintained an extramarital relationship throughout his courtship and marriage to Ms. Mason. And audio evidence suggests he viewed this marriage as a means to access family assets, with his mistress explicitly referencing inheritance as their future goal. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The petitioner's father provided substantial documentation of respondents' calculated deception. This court finds that Mr. Boyd entered into this marriage under fraudulent pretenses, with the intent to access and claim family assets to which he had no legitimate right. Earl's attorney made one last attempt, desperation creeping into his voice. Your Honor, my client's relationship difficulties don't negate his emotional investment in this marriage. He's suffered significant reputational damage and emotional distress. Relationship difficulties? The judge's voice could have frozen water. Counsel, these photographs show systematic, premeditated adultery throughout the entire marriage. These recordings reference inheritance explicitly, demonstrating financial motivation. This was not a marriage built on affection that encountered difficulties. This was a scheme, carefully executed, with a documented pattern of similar behavior toward previous wives. She picked up her gavel, and I felt Maud's hand find mine under the table, gripping tightly. Divorce granted. No property division, no alimony, no cause for any financial award to respondent. The court finds that Mr. Boyd is entitled to nothing from this dissolved union except the debts and consequences he brought with him. The gavel fell with a sharp crack that echoed in the courtroom. Final. Done. Over. Maud's grip on my hand relaxed. I heard her exhale, a sound like releasing breath she'd been holding for months. We stood as the judge exited. Earl remained seated, staring at the table before him, his attorney packing papers with mechanical efficiency, already thinking about his next case, this lost cause behind him. Outside the courthouse, Maud and I descended the wide stone steps into bright August sunlight that felt cleansing after the cool, institutional air inside. We'd almost reached the sidewalk when Earl's voice stopped us. This isn't over. I turned. Earl stood on the steps above us, his face tight with rage barely contained, fists clenched at his sides. You think you've won? His voice rose. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did, old man. How you manipulated her, turned her against me, fabricated evidence. I turned to face him fully, calm and unmoved by the display. Everyone already knows, Earl. The court knows. Your creditors know. Your girlfriend knows. It's over. Walk away while you still can. You destroyed my life, he shouted, loud enough that people on the sidewalk turned to watch. The truth came out cold and clear. No, you destroyed your own life, Earl. You did that with every lie you told, every wife you defrauded, every debt you hid. I just made sure you didn't destroy my daughter's life, too. Maud stepped closer to me, her voice steady when she spoke. We're done here. Don't contact me again. The restraining order is already drawn up if you do. We walked to the car, leaving Earl standing on the courthouse steps, diminished and defeated, shouting something we didn't bother to hear. The following weeks brought news that felt like epilogue, like watching dominoes fall that had been set in motion months ago. Richard forwarded a notification. Earl had filed Chapter 13 bankruptcy. His creditors, learning the divorce settlement left him with nothing and no prospect of accessing family wealth, had accelerated collection efforts. The leased BMW was repossessed. The expensive clothes, the illusion of success, all of it liquidated or reclaimed. Maud heard through social channels, gallery connections who knew people who knew Mamie, that the relationship had ended abruptly. Mamie had vanished from Earl's life as quickly as she'd entered it, once she realized there was no inheritance coming, no future together, nothing but Earl's debts and lies and rage. Edwin's threatening letters stopped entirely after Richard sent one final communication, noting that continued harassment would result in legal action for abuse of process. The Boyd brothers went silent, retreating into whatever lives they had built on manipulation and legal intimidation. I found myself not thinking about Earl at all. He'd become irrelevant, a problem solved, a threat neutralized. Late August, I sat in my study with the official divorce decree, reading it one final time before filing it away forever. The legal language was dry, bureaucratic, but the effect was absolute. Maud Mason, divorced, free, restored to her life. Before Earl Boyd. Maud entered quietly, moving through the study with the comfort of someone at home. She sat in the chair across from my desk, where this had all begun back in March when I'd first felt that instinctive unease about Earl's questions. "The bankruptcy notice came today," she said. "His creditors took everything. The car, his furniture, everything in storage. They're garnishing his wages from whatever job he managed to find. That's not our concern anymore. Mamie left him too, I heard through the gallery network." She paused. "It doesn't matter. He's alone now, facing everything he built on lies." I felt no satisfaction in the statement, just acknowledgement of natural consequences. That's what happens when you build a life on deception. Eventually the foundation crumbles and there's nothing real underneath to hold you up. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't for Earl. They were relief, release, gratitude. "Dad, thank you. You saved me from spending years or decades with him. If you hadn't investigated, if you hadn't been patient enough to gather evidence, if you hadn't left it all at the villa where I couldn't avoid seeing it, I'll always protect you," I said simply. "Always have, always will. That's not negotiable. I know that now. I should have known it then. Should have trusted your instincts." I smiled, a genuine smile, the first in months. "Now we both know what we're capable of when we have to be. You're stronger than you think, Maud. You confronted him. You ended it. You walked away. That took courage." She stood, came around the desk, and embraced me. I held my daughter, feeling the weight of the past months finally lift completely. Justice had been served, not revenge for its own sake, but protection, not destruction, but exposure, not cruelty, but truth. When she pulled back, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the mahogany box containing the antique watch. "This was supposed to be your wedding gift," I said, opening the box. The French timepiece gleamed in the afternoon light, brass movements visible through the crystal face, scrollwork catching the sun. "It never made it to your hands that day, but it's still yours. It was always meant for you." She took it carefully, tears streaming down her face. "It's beautiful. The craftsmanship, Dad, this must have cost." $12,000, I said. "Worth every penny to see you holding it now, instead of him claiming it as marital property." She laughed through her tears, and the sound filled the study with something that had been missing for months. Joy. That evening, I poured 2 glasses of wine, something I hadn't done since before the wedding, since before Earl had entered our lives with his calculated charm. We sat together in my study, father and daughter, restored and whole. Outside, the New Orleans summer continued its heat, cicadas singing their evening chorus, but inside, everything was finally cool and calm and right. "To new beginnings," Maud said, raising her glass. "To truth," I replied. We drank, and I felt something I hadn't felt since March. Peace. I'd protected what mattered most. I'd used patience instead of rage, evidence instead of accusations, the legal system instead of personal vendetta. And in doing so, I'd not only saved my daughter, but shown her that justice, real justice, comes from strategy and persistence and truth. That was enough. That was everything. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.